Okay, this is Rick,
And this is Darren.
and welcome to another episode of It's Not What You Think. And today we are going to explore music of ancient Greece.
Yeah.
And it covers the area of 500 BC to 1 AD, which is actually a continuation from last week. And we're kind of hanging on this period because it's really important, and one could even say that this is the beginning of Western music.
Yeah, I would say so. Plus, we're about to see a shift, I think, of music from after Christ. Mm-hmm. So leading up to 1 AD, I think is probably the turning point for Western music.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Let's start with who's our first. Simonides. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He was alive 556 BC to 468 BC. And he was a Greek lyric poet. And he was referred to as the Greek Voltaire. How do you like that? So he must be...
wouldn't Voltaire be the French Simonides?
Maybe, if you're living in France, maybe that's what you call it.
Right.
Των ενθερμοπύλες θανόντων, ευκλεείς μεν άτυχα, καλός δο πότμος, βωμός δο τάφος, προγόν δε μνάστης, ο δίκτος έπαινος. Εντάφιον δε τιούτον, ούτε βρός, ούδο πανταμάτωρα μαυρώσει χρόνος, ανδρών αγαθών. Ο δε σηκώσει κι έταν ευδοξίαν, Ελλάδος ήλετο. Μαρτυρί δε και Λεωνίδας, Σπάρτας βασιλεύς. Αρετάς μέγαν λελιπός, κόσμον αέναον τεκλέος.
The name of that piece, struggling with my Greek.
Wow.
Encomion?
Sounds right.
Yeah, there you go. I thought it was...
It's all Greek.
Yeah, it's all Greek to you, huh? I thought it was pretty soothing.
Yeah.
The guy's voice had a real nice tenor that was just relaxing and soothing to listen to.
Yeah, and I think the string piece in the background sort of sounded like spa music almost. It was music that I would imagine is on in the background on a low volume,
right?
In a spa.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine that.
It was very, I don't know. It was like he would let the notes ring out, and so there was that, not like dead air, but resonant frequencies left over.
That's interesting, because when I play the piano, I like to just hang on the damper pedal and just have it or not the damper pedal, it's the other pedal, the resonator pedal, and it just kind of vibrates,
opens everything
up. Yeah, and it's really nice.
Yeah, but I think to your point about his voice being soothing, it's also, I think, the quality of the strings behind the voice is also soothing. So I think that's probably what they were going for, and I wish I understood what they were saying.
Yeah, no, I can't help you there. So we mentioned that this could be the beginning of Western music, and we want to definitely pay attention to Pythagoras, who was alive around 515 BC to 497 BC. And what I've noticed is that we started out with very primitive prehistoric music, and the focus was rhythm.
Yes.
And then we moved into civilization, and we got more melody.
Mm-hmm.
And now with Pythagoras, we're going to introduce harmony.
Yeah, so music is becoming more structured.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting with the foundations, which is rhythm, time, and moving into building layers on top of it. So it's becoming more complicated as we go.
Right. And remember last week and previous weeks when we listened to the Chinese music?
Yeah.
To my ears, my Western ears, the music is very dissonant and off. Where now I think I have an understanding, because Pythagoras really shaped the way we listen to music and gave it a certain harmonic structure that we're more used to listening and hearing.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because and we'll get to this track later, but one of the tracks that we listened to for this week sounded very similar to the Chinese music that we listened to last week.
No.
So
Okay.
when we get to that,
Right,
I'll point that out. But
Come on, let's go to ancient Greece, to the time of Pythagoras, the master egghead of them all,
Pythagoras?
the father of mathematics and music.
Mathematics and music?
Ah, you'll find mathematics in the darndest places. Watch. First, we'll need a string. Stretch it good and tight, plunk it. Now divide in half. Plunk again. You see? It's the same tone, one octave higher. Now divide the next section. And the next. Pythagoras discovered the octave had a ratio of 2 to 1. With simple fractions, he got this. And from this harmony in numbers developed the musical scale of today.
What are called the Greek modes. And he encouraged composers to create music using the Greek modes, and because using these series of notes, they all fit well with each other, and you have harmonious resonance and harmonious sound, as opposed to if you're just plucking away randomly, you're bound to get dissonances. And so the legend says that he was walking home and he heard a blacksmith banging on the hammer, or actually two blacksmiths banging on the anvil, and they sounded harmonious. And he's like, well, why is that? Sometimes they're harmonious and sometimes they're not. And he discovered it was the ratios. And so he played around with ratios just like we do with that rubber band.
the golden mean.
Yeah, and he came up with the golden mean, and he came up with the octave and the fifth and the fourth. And so if you play the octave, the fifth, and the fourth in combinations, they're all harmonious with one another. And so he encouraged that in his music.
So are we saying that Western music is more mathematical? Or is becoming more mathematical?
I think its basis is mathematics, yeah,
Right.
because he was a philosopher / mathematician.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think you can definitely say that. I think Bach would agree.
I was going to say, by the time we get to Bach, I think
yeah, it becomes like pure mathematics almost.
Right, exactly.
I'm telling you, when I listen to Bach, I feel like I'm mulling over a math problem.
But I'm wondering if that is the key distinction between music of the East and music of the West, is that the West tends to focus on that mathematical structure, the rigidity of the octaves and the scales and the harmonics.
And yeah, I agree with you, but there's so much inclusive in the Western music. Like, what came to my mind was jazz, and
Right.
jazz tries to weave in and out of that structure.
Right.
But you're right. I think the defining qualities that would make our music distinct from others is
To your earlier point about this being the focal point of when we're like the foundation of Western music, and it could be because of the Pythagorean theorem and the golden mean.
Yeah, I agree. With that being said, we have who's our next? Pindar.
Pindar, yeah.
Pindar was an ancient Greek poet who lived near 518 BC to 438 BC. And what's really cool, I'm going to play his ode number 12. And what I thought was really neat about this particular one, first, that the singer on this one is Steph Connor. She's the singer for the Babylonian Flood. So
Okay.
she
Another familiar voice.
Another familiar voice. And also, this particular ode was written and sung for the victor of the flute playing competition. Remember we were talking about how they had...
the Olympian.
Yeah, the Olympian flute players and the Olympian flute competition. And I don't know what that was. I mean, it must have been subjective, I guess. They just... A bunch of judges sit and listen and like, yeah, you 10, you know?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I wonder if it was before or after Pythagoras. If it was after, maybe they're listening for those mathematical resonances.
I believe it was after.
So maybe they had a structured judgment system.
Yeah, there you go.
But it seems to me more likely that they were probably just getting drunk on wine and this one's good. This is the one.
One thing I noticed about this piece is the huge melodic leaps. I mean, na 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 na, ah! She just jumps way up high.
Right.
And that's something that once we get into the AD, you won't hear for hundreds of years.
And I wonder if that has a lot to do with Pythagoras coming to that observation about the harmonics,
Right.
and then they just throw them in
Mhm.
because it's the same note, it's the same scale.
Right, yeah,
They just
yeah.
throw in the harmonic,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just a singular piece
Right.
like this. One thing I noticed is that the sound quality of the instrument that we're hearing, and I don't know what that instrument was,
It's an aulos.
it sounded like some of the music we heard from Egypt.
Yeah, you're right.
And again, I think that has to do with just a common
Mhm.
trade.
Mhm.
Greece and Egypt were trading.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
So it's cool to see that they're taking, from where we've been, they're taking instruments that are used in the region
Mhm.
and now adapting them to this newly found
Style.
harmonic scale.
Yeah.
So we're seeing not only the evolution, we're seeing the evolution of music in real time, really.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're seeing from Egypt to Greece.
And that's what's exciting about this project.
Right.
Yeah, we're really walking through the evolution of music.
Yeah, and again, I mean, like, not that the instrument sounded bad this time around, but it
Well,
definitely
it's
sounded
very
more,
raspy
Yeah,
and buzzy. We talked about that in a previous episode.
but it because it's following these new scales,
Mm-hmm.
there's a more
Yeah.
soothing
That's true.
quality to it.
Right,
It doesn't
I
sound
agree.
so
Well, right.
screeching.
The tone of the actual instrument was raspy and buzzing, but the way the melodic scale he was playing,
Right.
yeah, made it stand out from previous instances.
Right, right,
Mhm.
exactly.
I want to listen to another one by Pindar, his first ode.
Okay,
The one we just listened to was number 12. We're going backwards to number 1.
okay.
This one is written in praise of the hero Syracuse. I guess he's from New Jersey. For his victory in the Pythian Games.
Hmm.
I think it's a very pretty melody.
Yeah, Yeah, and not only is it a nice melody, but the rhythm is consistent. As
Mhm.
opposed to just like a clap in the background. There's actual drums that are following a pattern.
Right.
So again, I think we're seeing this evolution of music where we're adding layers to things that we feel are complete.
Right.
We've completed rhythm, now we have rhythm, let's layer on top of it.
Hmm. And it makes sense that your rhythm would be basic, like a metronome, at first.
Right.
And then you come over and you say, hey, let's do something a little more interesting now. And just a little bit, and then just a little bit. And then as, as time goes on.
So ironically, I was listening to this as I was eating breakfast.
Okay.
And I had this, what I had cooked was this tomatoes, basically bruschetta. I put the tomatoes on top of some bread that I made. And it felt very...
Mediterranean.
yes, so very Mediterranean. And it was almost like this was music that I could imagine somebody listening to, eating the dish that I'm eating
Right.
in ancient Greece, right? Because, although I guess they probably didn't have tomatoes, but something similar.
Uh-huh.
Olives on a tapenade on a piece of bread while listening to this music in the background. I can imagine that.
Didn't they think tomatoes were poisonous?
They did, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Part of the nightshade family.
Right.
But also apparently it was because they were eating them on pewter and the acid in tomatoes was getting the lead in and people were going crazy.
Oh, there you go. Let's move on to Sophocles. He's a Greek playwright who wrote over 120 plays. Only 7 survived. He lived around 497 to 406 BC. Have you seen any of his plays?
I have not.
Have you seen any, like Aristophanes, Euripides, any of the Greek plays?
Euripides I think I've read, but I
Okay.
haven't seen it.
Yeah, I haven't either. I would love to see some of the ones that are based on the Iliad or the Odyssey.
That would be cool.
All right. Well, this particular one we're going to listen to, Tecmessa's Lament. Don't know what play it's from. We're going to listen to it anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so we cleared up the mystery of who Tecmessa is, and it's from the play, Sophocles' play Ajax.
Right.
And Tecmessa is...
She's the slave concubine for Ajax, who was a hero of the Battle of Troy.
And he died,
Right.
and she sang a song to his death, a lament.
Yep.
And it was a pretty sorrowful song.
It definitely sounded sorrowful.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think we're seeing it like we saw earlier, those like jumps to the octave
Yeah.
quite frequently throughout.
Right. You mentioned Aristophanes. You were listening. He's known as the father of comedy.
Mm.
I think that's just interesting that he would be called that. He had he wrote 40 plays. 11 of them survived. He lived around 446 BC to 386 BC, and I really like the tracks that we heard from him.
I do as well.
Yeah.
They were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the one, in fact, one of them is very reminiscent of Chinese music. It's in fact, I think it starts with a bell.
Okay. Well, let's give it a listen to.
Okay.
Aristophanes! Patros apogianum variacheos.
Yeah, what was the title of this track?
Oh, probably something I couldn't pronounce. Let's see here. Aeonoin Nephale.
So the thing that stuck out immediately to me on this was how similar it was to the hymn to Confucius.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was mentioning, the instrument pattern follows the vocal syllables,
Right.
and so every hit is matching the syllable change.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very common that we saw in the Confucian music.
Right. Right.
And then besides, it starts off, there's that kind of early, and I don't know what they're really going for in the beginning. It sort of sets the stage. Aristophanes being a playwright, that seems correct.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that call, and then a response. And then it hits a gong in sort of the same way that we saw with the Chinese with the bell.
Right.
There's a bell, and then it kicks off.
And the vocals had a Chinese quality to
Yeah.
them too. I don't know if I'm just making that up, but I honestly wouldn't tell the difference between if he was singing Greek or Chinese.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably
The way he was singing it, the
Right.
way he was vocalizing it.
right. And the pattern of the music
Mhm.
is similar as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it really was.
I wonder if there was any link between the two civilizations that actually carried forward into Aristophanes' inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So, but overall, not a very enjoyable piece to listen to.
Yeah, although, speaking of enjoyable pieces, the chorus from the Birds actually I thought was really nice.
That was fun. Let's give that one a listen.
A chorus from Aristophanes' play The Birds.
Einun heimas nomis seti Theus, exete crestai mantesimusais, horais, que monithere, metrio nige, cucapodrantes, cathadumethanosam nunamonoi, paratais nephalais sospercosus. Alaparontes, dosomen humin, autois paisin, paidon paisin, lofugie, anbiane renein, neoteta gelota corus alias, galaton ithon hoste parestai. Ian huminu paton agathon. Otoplu tesatapantes. Musandok maya. Cho 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 tings. Oikile meth hey sego. Na paisi te kai karu face and ureis. Cho 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 tings. Hetumenas melias epifulo komu. Cho 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 tings. Diameskenuas zuthes meleon. Cho 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 tings. Panino musia rusalo fino. Semnata metricorum atorea. To 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 tings. And then ospere melita. Cho 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 tings. Fronicos ambrosion meleon apaposkito carbonae feron gluceanodan. Cho 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 tings.
Okay, so just for clarification, most of what we're listening to, we have the text, but not the actual music.
Mm.
And so what we just heard is I thought was very beautiful, and it was a chorus from the Byrds, and there was some mimicry of birds going on. And I think that it's intentional that they were mimicking birds. And so it was very pretty, but I just want to make sure we know that we have the words, but the melody is something that we've imagined, and that this is something that could have been sung during the Byrds, but we don't have the actual musical score.
To your knowledge, is this score in the Greek mode?
Oh, you mean what we just listened to?
Yeah, does this follow the Greek modes?
Yeah, I would guess it probably did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you'd be really inept if you're recreating Greek music and not using Greek words.
Right. Agreed. But I just wanted to confirm
yeah, no, I got
the
it.
authenticity of the piece.
Right, and my ear isn't sharp enough to determine, hey, that's a Greek mode
I gotcha.
versus that's a standard one. We can't have an episode about Greek music and not talk about Plato.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't compose music,
Right.
he was certainly an influential philosopher. Influential to today, just as much as Pythagoras was, I believe. What do you know about Plato?
So, I know Plato's theory, but I also know that, Aristophanes, one of the most famous pieces from the Symposium, which is the dialogue on what the nature of love, one of the most famous parts of that is when Aristophanes is giving his speech. Aristophanes is at this table, and he's talking about how he sees love, and he gives this whole myth about the gods creating humans and then separating them.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with that.
And that's Aristophanes.
Yeah. And very specifically, human beings were male in the front and a female in the back,
Yes.
and we were attached
Yes.
as one person, and Zeus split us,
Yep.
and we're forever running around trying to find our other half.
The other half, exactly.
And I think that's a brilliant metaphor.
I think that's the title of the speech. It's commonly called The Other Half.
Okay.
And oddly enough, in the dialogue, in the Symposium, Aristophanes is sort of a comic character. He's he's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he's intending to be. I don't think Plato's like digging at Aristophanes. I think they were perhaps contemporaries, but I think Plato's probably paying homage to Aristophanes as the father of comedy by making him a comedian type character. And
Gotcha.
I think he actually in the it's been a while since I read it. I think he gets drunk to the point that it upsets Socrates.
Huh.
So.
Okay. You started off and you said you're familiar with Plato's theory. What is Plato's theory?
Yeah, so the theory of the forms.
Oh, the theory of forms.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is, that there is the perfect form of something in some ether, and that everything that so this chair isn't quite a chair. It is attempting to be a chair. But the chair itself, the form of the chair, is a thing that's universal.
Right.
And I think that probably lends to what we're seeing in now Greek music. The theory of the form is probably quite prevalent at the time, and I would imagine that there's some form of music, whether it's a form of harmonics, which is probably what Pythagoras is after, that people are striving towards.
You know what comes to my mind when I hear about the theory of forms? Carl Jung's theory of the archetypes.
Yeah.
To me, it kind of resembles that.
Yeah. I would imagine that Plato was going for something similar, although Aristotle would say otherwise. But
You think Plato was ripping off Jung?
yeah, we'll call it Plato the Greek Carl Jung.
There you go. I was studying reality therapy with Glasser, and he talked about how we have an image in our mind of what we want, and then depending on how realistic that image is, we can move towards that and achieve our goals. Or if it's an unrealistic image that doesn't quite match reality and our ability to achieve it, then it just causes us stress. And when I learned about Plato's theory of forms, that came to my mind as like a practical application of the theory of forms.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if you think about too, if you constantly have this perfect image of, and the thing we always used in my studies was a circle. You have this constant image of a circle, and if you're obsessing as an artist and drawing a perfect circle, you're going to be stressing, and you're going to be going so fine to detail, even though you'll never be able to draw a perfect circle, because the perfect circle exists in the ether and not necessarily in reality.
And also, if the image that you're drawing from is not a perfect circle, you're always going to make imperfect circles.
Yep. Right.
So your image needs to be as precise as possible.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what Glasser was saying.
Yeah.
Your image needs to be as precise as possible in order for you to achieve that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Aristotle was along the same lines. What time these guys? Let's see here. I have here that says Plato wrote the Republic in 380 BC, and Aristotle wrote his Politics in 350 BC.
Aristotle was a student of Plato.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or maybe I knew it and forgot it.
Aristotle was a student of Plato. In fact, I think that famous picture that you see
of
the philosophers walking, I think Plato's the one in the center, and I think he's talking to Aristotle.
Okay. I never paid attention to that, I guess.
I was a philosophy major.
Yeah, all right. Fair enough.
Don't say philosophy majors are useless. Because here it is. I'm using the knowledge that I've learned.
And so, what stands out about Aristotle's philosophy?
So it's different from Plato in that Aristotle wasn't looking at the forms; he was looking at the things themselves. And so, a chair is a chair. It's not a chair trying to be the perfect chair.
Right, and it was a good chair if it achieved its function.
Exactly. The other thing I can recall, it's been a while since I read Aristotle, was he had the agreements. I think was his whole thing. There were 4 agreements, and I don't remember them.
Okay.
I don't remember it at all.
I remember he got into virtues, and that kind of creeps into personality theory, because in the he says that there are two vices, and a vice is an excess of one particular trait. And so, like, let's say humor. If you have no sense of humor, you're a bore. If you have too much humor, you're a buffoon. And he said you want to go right in between and have the balance of the two, and then have a witty sense of humor. And I thought that was, these guys amaze me.
Oh, yeah.
Aristotle and Plato. Like I said, I could see their practical applications to what's going on in my life today. And
and that's why their philosophies persist.
Let's move on to Euripides. Euripides lived around 480 BC to 406 BC. He was a Greek playwright. He wrote 92 plays. 18 of them survived. Let's listen to a chorus from one of his.
Okay.
This is one of those rare instances when we actually have the music. It's a fragment from the play Orestes by Euripides. This particular archaeologist put it together with a chorus, a choir singing the chorus. And I really like it. I think it does a great job of hearing it with all of the people behind it.
Yeah, and this is probably how it was in the play.
Right.
At an amphitheater with a choir of people belting out. It's probably the way that it was intended to be done by Euripides.
Yeah, I agree. They didn't have amplifiers and speakers, and so you have to fill the stage with a lot of singers so everybody in the back can hear.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was nice. There's also Iphigenia Aulis. It's another fragment.
Okay.
You want to hear that one?
Yeah.
Okay, that was Iphigenia Olos. It was a fragment, one of the rare instances when we actually have the musical score along with the text.
Mm-hmm.
And it was performed by Ensemble Kyrillos.
Mm.
Now, I watched a documentary about this particular ensemble, and they claim that they have the precise method of reconstructing ancient Greek music, and everybody else is wrong. And it's funny because the previous one that we heard, Orestes with the choir, he kind of says the same thing.
Oh.
So everybody, I think there are different interpretations of the scores, and everyone kind of is convinced that they're the ones who are doing it right, which, I mean, makes sense. You don't want to convince yourself you're doing it wrong
Yeah.
and put it on an album.
I say we leave it up to the judges and bring back the Music Olympics.
There you go, right?
Figure out which is the closest.
Now, this is such a tremendous story. They're getting ready to go off to the Trojan War, and Agamemnon has 100 ships in the bay, and there's no wind. And he asks one of the priests, why isn't there any wind? And the priest says, well, you've offended Artemis, and I think that's the god. I'm not 100% sure. It could have even been Poseidon.
Mm.
Although Artemis might be Poseidon's daughter, so it was one of them. And he says, you're going to have to do something to appease the gods. And he says, sure, what am I going to have to do? And he says, you're going to have to sacrifice your daughter Iphigenia.
Mm.
And then, obviously, Agamemnon struggles with, oh my God, do I do this or do I not do this? And so finally he's like, if we're going to go to war, then I must play my part. And so he goes to his home where his wife Clytemnestra and his daughter Iphigenia are there, and he lies straight out and says, I need you to come back to the ships because I've arranged to have Achilles marry you. And so she's like all excited. Wow, that's great. And so she comes back, and it's such a sad story because he ends up sacrificing her. And Iphigenia, from what I remember, she goes willingly.
Mm.
Once she finds out the trick, she doesn't scream and want to run away like her mother certainly does. But she goes willingly. She says, "Okay, I'm willing to sacrifice myself to the greater good." And I think that tends to be a theme in mythological tales, sacrificing the child.
Mm.
And maybe there's a psychological component that's being transmitted in story.
Well,
Sacrifice your child.
to come back from young,
Mhm.
it's we see the same thing in the story of Abraham.
Right. Uh-huh.
It's an archetype at this point,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and it keeps repeating throughout history in various stories.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say about this piece that I noticed was really strange was the part where the rest of the chorus would die out and the one soloist would be going da na.
Yeah, I noticed that too. You're right.
It was real weird. And I think to me it makes the song itself feel asymmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that is probably the point of symmetry.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I don't know. It just seems not to be. It's dissonant and it sounds off with the rest of the piece.
And I've heard that style of singing in quite a number of the interpretations of ancient Greek music. And I don't know if that's embedded within the instruction of the text or the composition, or if they put that on there as this is the way to recite ancient Greek poetry, so that's how we're singing it. I'm really not sure. But I noticed that too, and it's not very pleasing.
No, it's not. No,
Yeah.
and it gives the rest of the piece this, I don't know, disorganized feeling.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you on that.
But
So this is a little confusing to me. I have several. I have this CD, Music from Ancient Greece. And then I have this CD, Music of the Ancient Greeks. And then this CD, Sounds from Classical Antiquity, Apollo and Dionysus. Okay. And then I also have, not on the actual CD, but this one here, Music of the Antique Greek. And each one of them has 2 tracks of Orestes. And they have dates next to them. One of them says 400 BC, and another one says like 200 BC. And so I don't know if there were 2 performances that were written down and they're different. And so when it comes to performing and recording ancient Greek music, you want to put them both down because there's such a scarcity of material. So I'm not really sure what the difference is. But we have another version of Orestes. Dramatic fragment, 200 BC. This is from Orestes. So we cleared up why there are 2 different versions of Orestes and they're 200 years apart. One was
potentially.
Yeah, well, one was 400 BC and the other was dated around 200 BC. And as you said, it was probably 2 different composers putting their own spin on it, like George Gershwin would write the tune,
Right.
and then someone would play it, like Elton John would play it, and he would put his spin on it, and then someone else would play it 10 years later and put his spin on it.
Right.
And apparently they were doing that way back in ancient Greece.
Potentially, that's the theory. Anyway.
Right.
I would imagine that's the theory. I mean, you got to think about now. We've gotten to a point in civilization where culture is becoming a thing that is multi-dimensional. So you can have playwrights like Aristophanes and Euripides, and then you have musicians that are taking maybe the play written or a myth and then putting it to music. And so it's possible that there's a myth of Orestes, or there's several actually, and different musicians now are composing pieces.
Right. Remind us who Orestes is?
So Orestes is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and he comes back
This
to
is the Trojan War.
Yes.
Correct.
He after Agamemnon returns, Clytemnestra has taken a lover, and the lover Agamemnon returns with Cassandra, who is a Trojan princess. According to the play Agamemnon, he steps on a purple carpet, which was symbolic of the gods, and in the play, it's sort of he's seeing himself as above the gods, and so the gods set out his demise.
He just pissed off the gods throughout the entire thing.
It's his whole thing. I mean, it's Agamemnon's thing. Is he is the god. He imagined himself as a god king, which is particularly why he was going after Troy.
And funny enough, he was called the King of Kings.
No, he was the King of Kings.
Yeah.
And he gathered all of the kings of Greece
Right.
and took them on a journey
Yeah.
across the Aegean into Troy.
Mhm.
Oddly enough, the common myth for Rome is that the people who fled the sack of Troy ended up on the Italian peninsula and founded the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
That's a common myth.
Right.
But so back to Orestes, he after Agamemnon is killed by Clytemnestra's lover Aegisthus, Orestes flees, but then comes back to seek vengeance and ends up killing both his mother and her lover Aegisthus.
Mhm.
And it's from my observation, pretty reminiscent of Hamlet.
Mhm.
Although Hamlet was dealing with an uncle,
Right.
not his father.
Right.
Uh,
And also, that time period, you also get Oedipus and Electra.
yes, right.
And so there's that theme that seems to percolate throughout the Greek myths.
Well, one of the myths, as I was looking, Orestes deals directly with Electra.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't look at the story enough to see the details, but it's one of the more common ones is Orestes with Electra.
And I believe that occurs in the play Electra.
Mm.
That the two of
That
them
would make
get
sense.
together and they kill Clytemnestra.
Ah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it stands to reason that
Mhm.
there's probably a play or a story about
Right.
Orestes
Sure.
around which musicians are composing music.
And speaking of playwrights, we're gonna slide over to Rome just temporarily.
Okay.
Um,
So Troy has been sacked, and now the refugees have found their way onto
Yes.
the Italian peninsula.
right.
Agamemnon is gone, and Greece has fallen.
Uh-huh. There's a Roman playwright named Terence.
Hmm.
He was alive 195 BC to 159 BC.
Hmm.
And we have a fragment of one of his. He put music to his plays,
Hmm.
and we have a fragment. When I say a fragment, we have 4 bars.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're not going to hear a whole lot, but I mean, you got to admit this is like the Holy Grail,
Right.
You know,
right.
you're
of ancient music.
Yeah, I mean, you're finding something, and you're like, oh my God, this is. I don't care if it's only 4 bars. We have to, play
It is
this.
a soundbite.
Right?
Literally.
Yeah. Right.
And, well, if it's for modern audiences with our 15-second attention span nowadays.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll make a recurrence.
Maybe we should just keep playing it.
Yeah.
We'll make it our theme song.
There it is.
Udunus hominum omote vivet nunquam quisquam blandior.
Well, that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was by far the best piece of music we've listened to so far.
You're being sarcastic.
I am, yeah. It was. But you know what struck me immediately is the way that he's singing sounds sort of like the Gregorian chanting.
No.
And what struck me is that
I hadn't considered
perhaps we have more Roman music than we thought,
Uh-huh.
because what became Gregorian chanting follows the modes of Roman music.
It really does, actually. And then when we get into the church music, the church modes practically are lifted from the Greek modes.
Mm.
And so, yeah, like you said, they probably went from Greek to Italy to Greg.
Yeah, right. Because if this is true Roman, like this is the snippet, the 20 seconds of Roman music that
Right.
we have insight into,
Yeah,
it sounded very much like a Gregorian chant.
that's true.
With
It
music
didn't occur
in the
to me until
background.
you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. So, in contrast to having a Roman soundbite,
Mm.
we also have the most complete piece of Greek music.
Mm.
We have the entire song. Up until now, we've been listening to fragments and portions. Yet here in, what year is this? Well, they say around the first century. We have the Epitaph of Sikilos, and it is the oldest surviving complete musical composition.
Hmm.
And so, let's give this a listen to.
Okay.
I think everybody, if you only listen to one piece of ancient Greek music, you got to listen to this one.
This is gonna blow Terrence out of the water.
I think it does.
Je suis l'image de Pierre. Seikilos me place ici en signe durable d'immortelle mémoire. Icon ilithos imi, tifissime Seikilos entha, mnimis athanatu sima polychronion. Seikilos efter, zi. Seikilos euter, il est vivant.
Okay, we just listened to the Epitaph of Seikilos. One of the things we discovered is that this is the oldest surviving complete piece of music.
Yes.
This is in contrast to a couple episodes ago when we were in the 1400s. I think it was the episode Music of Antiquity.
Yeah.
We came across the Hurrian hymn, and to differentiate the Hurrian hymn from this piece, the Hurrian hymn is the oldest substantially complete work. So it's not a finished product,
Right.
but it's not a fragment. It's like almost complete.
Right. Right.
And this one is complete. So
Yes.
this one, the Epitaph to Seikilos, is officially the oldest complete piece of music we have. Comments about this piece?
I thought it was nice. Actually, it was. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand the Greek, and I don't really care for the beginning where it's the spoken word. But
Right.
when she was singing, I thought it was quite nice.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of like we were talking about, it's a drinking song. And I questioned, well, if it's a drinking song, how can it be an epitaph? Or what is the resolution of that seeming contradiction? And when we listen to we read the words in English, it comes out, while you live, shine, and by no means grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like a celebration. It was, let's have a song,
Yeah.
and cheers to our friend who's
It's almost
moving
like
on.
it's almost like singing a toast.
Yeah, right.
And, which I imagine is probably how the ancient Greeks thought of drinking songs, as opposed to like the English, the modern English.
And I believe the Egyptians did as well,
Mm.
because of the fact that they had so much in with the sarcophagi
Mm.
that they really were, the death was the next part of the journey.
Right.
And so I imagine the Greeks probably were the same way. In fact, you and I both have a good grasp of Greek philosophy. Didn't the Greeks have the understanding that your body is your coffin, and then when you die, it releases your soul?
I think so. I mean, the only thing I can recall about the Greek funeral traditions is that they would put the coins on for the ferryman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
To bring your soul to the other side.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't pay the ferryman, like
right.
what's his name says.
Exactly.
Chris de Burgh.
So that's all I know of the Greek. I don't know what their afterlife was like, but I just know that they would pay the ferryman to take your soul over to the other side. But it makes sense. I mean, if your body leaves, then your soul would be taken by, I think it's Carrion.
Yeah,
is the name of the boatman.
Uh-huh.
So that makes sense that your body would be a coffin that your soul is freed from upon death.
Next we have up 2 hymns to Apollo, and they're pretty significant pieces because, again, I think they're not the oldest, but I think they are substantial pieces of music.
Yeah, and what's interesting in my research of the hymns to Apollo is that the second one, they exactly dated it in 123 BC, and they also have confirmed that is the first time that this piece would have been played.
Oh wow! Okay, so premiere.
Yeah,
the premiere
of this
is of the second hymn. We're gonna listen to.
It was top of the charts in 123 BC.
Right. That's right. There's only 2 others below it.
Exactly.
We're gonna listen to both of those. The first one and the second one. Okay, we just listened to the 2 Delphic hymns to Apollo. The first one is composed by a man named Athenaeus around 127 BC. There's some discrepancy about the exact number because they couldn't read.
There's an inscription on the carving. I think they found it carved on a wall.
Okay.
And there was an inscription, and it was too damaged to be able to tell.
But their best guess is within the ballpark of 137 to 127.
Correct.
And the second hymn, they were able to precisely identify.
Yep.
128 BC.
Yep.
And that was composed by Limenaeus.
And son of Throinos.
And that means he would be the oldest.
He's the oldest known composer of a complete work of music.
Oldest known composer of a complete work of music. That should be in every school book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
he's the OG of
exactly.
composed music.
And so he composed. We actually listened to 2 pieces by him. The first piece we listened to was the first Delphic hymn. The second piece we listened to was the second Delphic hymn, but it also included a processional at the end.
Right.
And that's why there was like a pause, and then they started banging on the drums and went into like a chorus like processional.
That makes sense.
What are your comments about these 2 pieces? Remember the first one, we actually had a video and we watched the choir and the guy playing the aulos, and the second one we just heard audio.
So the first one was, I think, a little less. It wasn't as exciting. It was a choir piece. It was a vocal piece. It was cool, and I think it was interesting to hear ancient Greek style music.
Right.
But it wasn't particularly compelling. The second piece was much more compelling, and it's even still stuck in my head. The vocal melody. It's a little bit more rhythmic, a little bit more melodic. The harmonics are there. And then the procession. And the cool thing about the second piece, is that it was a processional song, so it was meant to be played at a religious sort of thing at a temple of Apollo. And so hearing it like that, you can kind of imagine being there. You can almost see what that might have sounded like. Probably a little bit more primitive than what we have, but
right.
But that is probably the best surviving piece of like ancient experience, if ever there was a way to describe it.
I agree. Yeah. So that completes our exploration of ancient Greek music up until 1 AD. But before we leave and finish this episode, I want to squeeze in a Roman. Ovid.
Yeah.
Ovid is a Roman poet, and he was alive 43 BC to 17 AD. Just crossed the line and made it to 17 AD. And he has several. Metamorphosis is one of his famous pieces. I actually read a chunk of that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Beauty and the Beast, Cupid, I think came from Ovid. But anyway, we're gonna play one of his pieces.
Okay.
He didn't compose the music. He was a poet, but poetry was always sung and always accompanied by music, musical instruments, and so this is what it could probably sound like.
Okay.
Clare nepos Atlantis, Hades, quem montibus olim, ed idit Arcadis pleias una Iovi, pacis et armorum superis imisque deorum, arbiter alato qui pede carpis iter, laete lira e pulsu, nitida quoque laete palestra, quod idicit culte lingua docente loqui.
Okay, so that was an invocation of Mercury, and the translation, he was describing Mercury with your winged feet and your lyre, etc., etc. Comments about this small little piece?
This is how I would imagine, and I would imagine most poetry at the time was played.
Mm-hmm.
This is more along the lines of what I would have expected the poetry to sound like. Less of what we heard from Greece. I would expect it more to sound like what we just listened to, where there's music playing behind a poet speaking.
And I can imagine he's outdoors. He's probably on a rock with like maybe 3 or 4, not a big crowd of people sitting around him. He's got a laurel wreath around his head,
and toga.
And he's playing. That's the imagery I get from this.
But this is so. It's interesting that we end with this one, because this is how I would have imagined if you had asked me to describe, or if you were to ask me to create a piece of what I would have perceived to be ancient Greek music.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been spoken poetry with very simple, like lyre played behind it. Exactly what we just listened to.
And he was playing arpeggios going up and down the scale. That creates a very tranquil effect.
Right. And it goes with the way that he was speaking. He was speaking very like soothingly. So almost similar to what we listened to at the beginning of this episode, where it was kind of spoken, really soothing, tranquil.
And so, who's your favorite out of these? If I had to pin you down and say pick one. Aristophanes. What attracted you to Aristophanes?
I liked the melodies of the birds. I liked the harmonics that they used in the birds.
Einun heimas nomis eti Theus, exete crestai mantesimus ais.
And I think for me, I'm somewhat biased towards Aristophanes, being that he is a character in the Plato dialogue. So it's hearing something that he wrote and then seeing him spoke of, and I imagine that Plato was somewhat honest in terms of his interpretation of real people. Could be fake, but we know Aristophanes was a person. We don't actually know that Socrates was a person, but I digress. It's just interesting to me to hear music from somebody that up until, I knew was a real person, but could have treated as a fictional character in a Plato dialogue.
Right. I would say one of my favorites is a toss-up between the one Steph Connor sang and the one with the choir. And I thought the one with the choir was really indicative of what it probably sounded like. Because that one was a fragment from a play, and their plays were done outside in the arena, and you probably had to have a good amount of people, aka a choir, to sing so everyone can hear it. And so I really liked it. It was very pleasing. And Steph Connor, she's got a beautiful voice.
Yeah.
About anything she sings, I think, and there's a certain seductiveness about having it in Greek, in a language that I don't personally understand. It's that much more attractive.
Yeah, understood.
Now, out of all of the stuff we listened to, the question of the day: would you recommend any to a friend?
No. No, I mean, again, I say this all too
It's
often.
very specialized music.
Yeah, I say this all too often, but I would recommend this to a friend who has a particular
Uh-huh.
interest in ancient
Right, yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
If you are a fan of the Roman Empire, for example, I would say,
Right.
hey, well, why don't you want to listen to this
Mhm.
Terence, which is a snippet, 26 seconds of what the Romans would have
Right.
listened to. But I wouldn't.
Now you're better for it.
right. Although in some sense of irony, I listened to some of this music this morning while I was eating breakfast, and it was actually quite nice. And
Yeah.
I might repeat this
Uh-huh.
experience again.
Right. Well, speaking of repeating, I hope you repeat this experience and stay with us again next week. Till then,
Stay tuned.